Let's go! Let's do this! Ooh.
Quite a scar, just living my life with no big words.
Wow, it has been a hot minute, but I'm finally back and I have a little guest with me. This is my little Aras Kyra, who finally was born on September 7th, Wednesday, September 7th. I have been away way too long, so finally I'm back today with the labour and delivery story for this little guy.
Everyone judging me, don't wanna care.
Hello and welcome to my channel Work.Life.Mum, where I talk about all things to do with being a working parent and trying to have a life in between. For those of you I have not met before, my name is Hills. I work in big tech in a really demanding job. I'm currently on maternity leave with my third surprise baby boy, and I documented most of my pregnancy journey on this channel. So if you have time and you want to check that out, you can find it in the pregnancy playlist. 10 weeks ago, nearly 10 weeks ago, I had this lovely little bundle here, and I am only now getting the opportunity to share the journey of my labour and delivery story. And I hope now that he's getting a little bit bigger, he's not demand feeding quite as much as he was before, that I'll be able to do more about life with a newborn baby. And for those mums juggling more than one kiddo, how on earth you manage it. So let's go back to the very beginning. Aras Kyra was due on September 6th. And because I'm 40, I was told that if I was not naturally going to go into labour on September 6th, then I would be induced. And so I was determined to go into labour naturally. And I tried all kinds of things on the lead up to that, which I documented on TikTok. So I did a little bit of a countdown from 10 days before my due date to when he actually arrived on TikTok. You can check it out on Work.Life.Mum. Those of you that were following my pregnancy journey, you will know that I'm over 40 and so really needed to be in labour before or on my due date, otherwise I was going to be induced. I was doing everything possible to try and make this one arrive a little bit early for two reasons. One, I didn't want to be induced, and two, my kiddos were starting school the day before he was due, and so I didn't dare want to miss the chance of seeing them on their first day at school. My 11-year-old was actually starting high school, so a huge important time for him, and my now 6-year-old was starting year one, and there was lots of change going on at his school as well. So the mum guilt, if I hadn't been there, would have been through the roof. I did make it for their first day of school, which was Monday the 5th of September, and by the Tuesday I had still not delivered this little guy, so I called the hospital and they instructed me to come in for induction. So I dropped the kids at school and we headed straight to the hospital. Now this was such a surprise that I got to this point. The universe really does laugh at us when we try and make some plans, because I had been having so many signs that this guy was going to come early, and even the midwives thought he was going to come early. So the fact that we made it to the due date was crazy to me. It was so surprising, but kind of laughable at the same time, given how much I wanted him to come a little bit early. I covered the lead up to the birth date and the birthday itself on TikTok, so I think it was from 10 days before I had him through to delivery. I documented every day on TikTok with all of the symptoms, you know, what I was experiencing every day, what I was feeling about whether labour was going to come, and I'm so happy I documented it, because you really forget everything, yet that is such a pivotal time of your life. As I said, my due date arrived, I managed to get the kids to school, I headed into hospital. At this point I was already 3 centimetres dilated. I had been 3 centimetres dilated for the best part of 5 days at that point. I had already lost the mucus plug. there were lots of other signs that the baby was gonna come pretty swiftly. And so I felt confident that when I went into the hospital, they would break my waters and then, you know, out he would pop. How wrong I was, huh? So I went into the hospital, and at 11 o'clock they broke my waters, and then they said, you know what, we're so confident this baby is going to come, the head is far down, you've had very fast labours in the past, which is true. And so they said, go for a walk, let's get this moving, and when you come back, I'm confident we are going to deliver this baby. So they broke my waters, which is a little bit uncomfortable, but you really just have to breathe through it. They also took some blood because I was anemic throughout the pregnancy, and they wanted to just check the iron levels at that point as well. So it was really bizarre. They broke my waters. I put these huge maternity pads in, like nappies, and had to walk around. We actually went for lunch at a really cute Greek restaurant, and I felt great. And there's an amazing huge royal park next to the hospital called Richmond Park, and so we walked through there as well, and my contractions really started to pick up a pace. So I was tracking them on the app, and I was also thinking like, wow, I'm gonna go back into the hospital and wham, I'm gonna be pushing this little one out. I cannot tell you how uncomfortable it is to go on a walk when you are gushing water. I mean, it's so uncomfortable, and even though you're wearing these huge maternity pads, they're not really doing the job. So it is incredibly uncomfortable to walk, to feel the water coming, to be having contractions at the same time. I mean, it was not a fun walk towards the end. They gave me some tips, like put one foot up on the curb when you're walking, so up and down, that's meant to do some work as well. So the hospital called me because we'd been out for around 2 hours or so, and they were like, are you coming back? We just want to make sure you're okay. And I was totally fine and around the hospital area. So I came back and they checked on me, and I was still just 3 centimeters dilated, even though I was having more contractions. They said, keep moving around the hospital room. I had my own room. And you know, try and maintain the cadence of the contractions. At that point, the contractions were coming about 3 every 10 minutes and lasting for around 30 seconds. So they really weren't lasting the length of time that they had to last in order for the labour to make the progress that it needed to. What are you doing, Bugaboo? When I got back to the room and I was moving around, I was on the birthing ball, the contractions really started to slow down, and it was getting to around 5 o'clock in the evening, and I'd been bouncing on the birthing ball, but nothing was really happening. I was getting a few aches and pains, but nothing like the contractions I had been getting. So I was really, really disappointed. They did another internal, it was still just 3 centimeters, so it's like, oh gosh, this is not going to plan. This is not what I thought was going to happen. And this is also not what happened with my previous 2 kids. So they suggested that we do some colostrum collection. Now this is TMI, but it is basically when you try and stimulate breastfeeding and get these little bits of golden liquid that comes out before your proper milk comes in, which is good to collect anyway to give the baby. It's the very best of what they need when they're born. And it also helps stimulate labour. So we, as in me and my husband, because it was really a 2-person job, we collected the colostrum. That honestly was like the weirdest thing. He had a syringe, we were just squeezing at the boob trying to get some milk out, and I just had one of those out of body moments where I was like, this is so weird. Like, if anyone was to walk in right now and see what we were doing, I mean, you just couldn't explain it. Anyway, that was the most bizarre bit, I think, of the entire experience. So that worked a little bit. The contractions picked up a little in intensity and frequency, and I think the nipple stimulation also worked a little bit too. And so I then was getting to the point where they were really coming quite quickly. My husband was just, you know, this is not our first time, so he was kind of chilled out, and I think he might have been even watching the football. I had the radio on, but by the time it got to, like, I think it was around 8:30 or 9, the intensity of the contractions really had picked up, and I asked for gas and air. So they hooked the gas and air up. We were still just alone in the room. We really didn't have the midwives coming in and out. Also, the midwives, as a side note, are horribly, horribly understaffed. They're incredible, the work that they do. I mean, they really blew my mind how they supported each other in such a tiny, tiny team. I think we went through 4 midwives in the end, just due to the length of time that I was in labour, and they were all just incredible. So, I mean, I think everyone would say the same thing about their midwife, but NHS midwives are not paid enough, and they are doing such an amazing, amazing, amazing job. So, off my high horse about that. So I was taking the gas and air, the contractions were coming frequently, and one of the midwives came in and said, listen, you're in really active labour, but you're still not dilating enough, which makes us think, given the fact that your waters were broken quite a long time ago, that we might have to give you something to speed this up. And they also said that they had run the birthing pool, because we were due to have, that was how we wanted to have the baby, that's how we had our last, and it was brilliant. So they'd run the birthing pool, and they suggested that I have some pain relief, which was a liquid form of morphine. I think they called it liquamorphine or something. It was like an abbreviation of liquid and morphine. And they said, just have it, it's not going to affect the baby at all, and you know, you are in quite a lot of pain and it's been quite a while, you're going to start getting tired. So I had the liquid morphine and initially didn't really feel much in the way of benefits, but I thought, if it doesn't affect the baby, why not have it? So I went ahead and did that. And then still the contractions were coming thick and fast, and so I thought at around midnight that I needed to push. I think honestly I was a bit confused with the liquid morphine, with the heavy amount of gas and air. I think I was just confused about everything happening, because I'd never been in labour this length of time before. So the midwife came in and she examined me and she said, babe, I'm so sorry. You're just past 3 centimetres. You're not dilating. The baby's head has moved further down, or is it effaced? Oh, I can't remember the name, but you're you know, progressing, but way more slowly than we would have thought. And we know you really want to have a water birth, but the doctors at this point think it's been too long and we're going to have to give you some of the hormones to speed up the intensity of the contractions and to get the baby out. And that means we need to advise you to take some pain relief, because you're already in such active labour. At that point I was having 4 contractions every 10 minutes. They were lasting at least a minute, or between 45-50 seconds and a minute. So they were definitely intense. And you know, they said, honestly, if I were you, and I really appreciated their honesty here, if I were you, I would have an epidural. The NHS, for those of you not living in the UK, the NHS really support natural birth, and so I've never had an epidural, I've never had pain relief other than gas and air, except for this liquid morphine this time. So for them to advise that if they were me, they would have it, I was like, okay, you know, at this point I'm gonna have it. So it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. We left the natural birthing centre, and they just round the corner basically of the ward. We went to the hospital-led unit, and it was about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning when the anaesthetist came to do the epidural. Now I was pretty terrified about an epidural. Like, I'm not a huge fan of needles, and to get one in your back is kind of terrifying. And at this point the contractions were so frequent that I was terrified I was going to move, which is one of the horror stories the horror stories that you get when you know, are getting an epidural is like, if you move, the needle can go into your spine, you can be paralyzed, you know, all of these things. So I was pretty terrified. To make things even more complicated, I was throwing up pretty frequently. I think the liquid morphine just did something to me. I was like kind of shaking. My husband said I just wasn't myself. I wasn't screaming, I wasn't in that kind of pain, but I was definitely kind of conserving energy, and I think just with the sickness, just you know, wasn't feeling my best, to be honest. Right, I'm gonna pause to change a nappy, maybe feed a little, and I'll be back. So where was I? Okay, so I got ready to get the epidural at like 1:30 in the morning. What I always saw in movies is somebody kind of cuddling a pillow, like bent over a pillow, and this was, you know, what they would do to get their back into position. And for some reason the anaesthetist didn't do that with me, and she kept saying arch your back, which to me was like going up like this and then curve the back. And so anyway, I could feel that it wasn't going in correctly, and on top of that I kept having contractions constantly. So I could feel the kind of wire that they try and feed into my back hitting against something. Actions were coming so thick and fast, so they eventually gave me a spinal block, which I think is just an injection into the back to try and stop me feeling the contractions so that they could actually just get the epidural in. And so for around 45 minutes to an hour, once they'd done that, I felt much better. I should say the epidural itself is actually fine. The catheter into the hand, is it catheter? Have I got the wrong word? Cannular. Catheter is another thing you need. Cannular into the hand. Are you talking too? The cannular into the hand was painful. I just don't think I had a really great nurse doing it. The good thing about it is you can have gas and air the entire time. So I was just chugging on that thing, which kind of makes you feel out of body, a little bit drunk. That stuff is a godsend, although I can't believe how much of it I must have consumed over the course of the hours that it took in labour. So for the first 45-50 minutes I kind of felt okay. I was kind of half dozing, half not, and then I started to feel the contractions again. So I thought, well, maybe this just isn't, like, epidural isn't what I thought. Maybe you still feel the contractions, but just not as much. So the midwife could tell that every minute or so I was still having the gas and air, breathing through the contractions, and she was saying, you know, Hills, is this working? Are you still feeling the contractions? And they were asking, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the pain level? And it was around an 8. Are you titty-tatting? Are you titty-tatting? So hard to do this video. They called the anaesthetist back twice between around 1:30 in the morning and around 8 AM, which is when that anaesthetist went off her shift. And they kept, you know, trying to give more injections and more of the medicine itself. So they kept, you know, trying to increase the dosage to see if that would work. And at the same time they started to say, you know what, maybe this isn't put in correctly. And I was like, oh my god, this is a nightmare. Like, firstly, I never thought I would have an epidural anyway, like a needle in my back, and secondly, the fact that I've had to get it once and then taken out and done again is like a complete nightmare. And at this point I'd been pretty much awake since, god, probably about 5 o'clock the previous morning. So this was way more than 24 hours of being awake, plus in pain, and not having much of a respite from that pain. And I was really emotional that something just wasn't going right. I just hadn't experienced a labour like this before, and I was just terrified that something was going wrong. Like, from the cannula not going in properly, to the epidural not working, to the waters breaking and the labour starting and stopping, and I think I just built up in my mind that this was all going to go really badly wrong. And maybe I'd watched too much of One Born Every Minute. And I just was really emotional. Like, I cried a few times. I begged my husband to tell me everything was going to be okay. But of course the staff are just amazing and very reassuring. So at 8:30 in the morning, the new anaesthetist came and she did some checks and she could tell the epidural wasn't put in correctly. It was giving me some pain relief, but only down my right leg, so not anywhere where the contractions were really affecting me. He's just staring so intently, like you've not heard this story before. So I got the epidural done again, and this time my husband helped keep me in position, and I was hugging a pillow and I didn't feel it very much at all. I mean, it was so pain-free getting it in, very different to the first time. Then it started working almost immediately, and what a different experience. So from about 9 o'clock in the morning through to when I delivered the baby, the experience was completely different to the previous 24 hours. And really, from that point, everything was really amazing. I still couldn't eat very much because I was very nauseous and throwing up. But I did sleep, and my husband slept. And then the weirdest thing is they woke me up at 12:30 and did an examination and said, amazing, you are 10 centimeters dilated. If you want, go back to sleep for an hour and then we will tell you when the baby's head is further down and then you can start pushing. How incredible. It was around 1:15 in the end where they woke me up and they said, you know what, the baby's head is down enough, I think it's time to give a push. And then they gave me all the instructions, like when we tell you to push, we're going to track when the contraction's coming. When we see one coming, we're going to tell you to push so hard into your bum and not stop until we tell you to stop. And you literally can't feel any of the contractions. I mean, it's just incredible. If I had known honestly how amazing an epidural was, I would have had it with all 3 of my kids, because we had our playlist on. The room was so calm. There was fairy lights on there. I mean, for the hospital part of the birth centre, they really tried hard to make it, you know, less hospital-like. They basically topped up the epidural just before I was pushing so that I wasn't going to feel any pain throughout or right after, which is just really amazing. I had seen so many films and documentaries where people had epidurals and they were pushing for like an hour and a half, and I really didn't have the energy to do it because although I'd only slept for maybe 2.5, 3 hours in the previous 26 hours or something like that. I, you know, was on reserve energy supplies. I didn't want to be pushing forever. I really wanted to get the baby out quickly. And I did. It was 5 contractions of pushing and he came out. And you know, if you've not given birth before with an epidural, you know that feeling of the ring of fire and you get a bit apprehensive about it. I mean, you're so close to the end, it's like, who cares, we're just going to push through, literally. But to know that you're not even going to have the fear of that ring of fire is mentally, you know, just really reassuring for me. I found it really reassuring. I just felt pressure. That was it. And when he came out, oh my gosh, he was so dark compared to my other kids. My 2 other kids are so blonde, but my husband is Turkish and we were always surprised we didn't have a Mediterranean little boy. But this one is, and he came out with this dark hair. He cried immediately, which is of course really reassuring. And he came to me for skin to skin. Then obviously they had to check me, they had to do some stitches. I think I had 2nd degree tears, which I had with my previous 2. And he went to my husband for skin to skin. Even my husband was a bit nervous to take him because he was smaller than our other kids. He was really, really tiny. And he was covered in white vernix, which, you know, my other kids weren't, even though my middle child was 1 day early, he had nothing on him. And then my oldest was 10 days late, so he definitely didn't. But this one was so tiny, was covered in white vernix. We really thought he was a bit earlier than they thought. Like maybe his due date was meant to be a bit later, but of course they never say anything like that to you. So I was stitched up, and then he wanted to feed immediately, which is also really different to my other kids. My others did not latch straight away, and they just wanted to sleep and sleep and sleep, and I really had to kind of not force but encourage heavily that first latch on. Whereas this guy, when my husband was doing skin to skin, he was trying to latch on to him, and then he handed him to me and he latched immediately. He really was such a good feeder from day one, which meant that he went from 46th percentile to 50th really quickly. I mean, he just gained weight fast. But I'll save that for other videos. We stayed in the hospital overnight. That is precautionary for anyone who had their waters broken and had their waters broken for that length of time. So it was amazing. We had our own room and I felt great. I think the effects of the epidural was still firmly in my system, and so I felt amazing. And my husband, you know, went home that night. I didn't want him to sleep on an uncomfortable chair, and also I really wanted my other kids to have time with one of their parents. We'd been in the hospital for a long time. So he went back home. I went to a private room, which is just standard in that hospital, which is incredible. Went to a private room with this little guy, and we just bonded that night. You know, they sleep so much and you panic that they're sleeping too much, but I watched some trash TV on my phone. We fed a lot. I got a little bit of sleep. I was so hungry. Oh my God, I literally just ate anything that was in sight. Actually, we ordered a pizza. We ordered a pizza and some garlic bread and some dessert before my husband left, and I demolished it. And so thirsty. Oh, sorry, bub. Sorry, I was a bit loud there, wasn't I? I was so thirsty. I mean, I must have drunk like 10 litres of water during labour. I'm not kidding. I think I got really dehydrated. My heart rate went so low. I just felt like I needed to refuel fluids and food, so I really ate. And then the next day is always the pain. This has been my experience with all three of my kids. Actually, after you give birth, just getting out of the hospital takes longer than actually giving birth, and that was the case for all of my babies. But eventually we got all our paperwork. My middle kiddo came in, met his little brother, and then we drove home together. And, you know, straight away, he is just part of the family, and I'll do other video updates about the first few weeks and what I experienced. But he is just a dream. He's such a dream. We are so lucky. I mean, he's gone back to sleep now, and he's already had a 3-hour nap this morning, so touch wood, it could all change very soon. But at the moment, we are in heaven. So I will be in touch with more videos and more content about life with a newborn. There were so many mums who were chatting about their due dates being around the same time as mine. I would love to hear how you got on, so please do leave a note in the comments and tell me how your experience was. And, you know, we'll talk more about life with numbers of kids. What hacks are working and what isn't working. What I've learned this third time around that's been different to the other times. So from both of us, and now sleeping one of us, we will see you soon. Take care.
I wanna stay wide open, 'cause if I shut down, it just gives